2,500 years ago, a prophet named the nations that would attack Israel. He named Russia. He named Iran. He named Turkey. Today, those three nations are allied. This is not interpretation. This is a map. In 1948, the impossible happened. A nation dead for 2,000 years was reborn in a single day, exactly as Ezekiel prophesied. That prophecy took 25 centuries to fulfill. It proved something. When Ezekiel saw the future, he saw it accurately. He saw 4 events. 1 has already happened. 3 are happening now. By the end of this video, you will understand what Ezekiel saw, you will see it in your headlines, and you will know what comes next. Prophecy 1. The nation that rose from the dead. The hand of the Lord was upon Ezekiel, and God carried him out in the Spirit, and set him down in the middle of a valley. The valley was full of bones. Ezekiel walked among them. They were completely dry, not recently dead, ancient, forgotten. Any trace of life had been gone for so long that even the memory of it was lost. This was not a graveyard. This was an extinction. Bones scattered across the valley floor with no pattern, no order, no hope. And God asked Ezekiel one question that seemed absolutely impossible. "Can these bones live?" Ezekiel answered carefully. "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." He understood he was looking at something beyond human possibility. No army could resurrect these bones. No medicine could restore what was lost. Only God could answer his own question. Then God told Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones. Speak to them. Tell them to hear the word of the Lord. And as Ezekiel spoke, something began to happen. There was a rattling sound. The bones started moving. They came together. Bone connected to bone. Tendons appeared. Flesh grew over them. Skin covered the flesh. But they were still not alive. They had no breath. God told Ezekiel to prophesy to the breath. Call it from the 4 winds. Breathe into these slain so they may live. And breath entered the bodies. They stood on their feet. A vast army. The dead had risen. This vision was impossible when Ezekiel saw it. No nation in human history had ever been destroyed, scattered across the earth for centuries, and then reassembled. The Assyrians scattered the northern tribes of Israel in 722 BC. Those tribes vanished into history. The Babylonians destroyed the southern kingdom. The Romans would later destroy Jerusalem again in 70 AD and scatter the Jews across every continent on earth for 2,000 years. Every empire that ever scattered a people absorbed them. The conquered nations disappeared. Their languages forgotten. Their identities erased. The Babylonians are gone. The Romans are gone. The Persian Empire is gone. The Ottoman Empire is gone. Every civilization that tried to destroy the Jewish people has crumbled into dust. But the Jewish people? Still here. Still speaking Hebrew. Still reading the same scriptures. Still praying toward the same Jerusalem. In 1897, Theodor Herzl organized the first Zionist Congress. The bones began to rattle. In 1917, the British issued the Balfour Declaration supporting a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The bones began coming together. From 1939 to 1945, the Holocaust killed 6 million Jews. The bones reached their driest moment. The world assumed the Jewish nation was finished forever. 3 years later, on May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. In a single day, a nation that had been dead for 2,000 years was reborn. Bones to nation, exactly as Ezekiel described. Jews began returning from every corner of the earth, from Europe, from Russia, from Ethiopia, from North Africa, from South America, from everywhere they had been scattered. They returned to their original land, speaking their original language, worshiping their original God. This is the only time in human history that a nation was scattered for 2,000 years and returned. The only time. There is no parallel. There is no comparison. And Ezekiel saw it 2,500 years before it happened. This is why the other three prophecies matter. If Ezekiel was right about 1948, something that seemed absolutely impossible, then he is right about what comes next. Prophecy 2. The reunion 3,000 years in the making. God gave Ezekiel another vision. He told him to take 2 sticks. On one stick, write the name Judah for the southern kingdom. On the other stick, write the name Ephraim for the northern kingdom. Then join them together in your hand so they become one stick. This vision requires historical context. When King Solomon died around 930 BC, the kingdom of Israel split in 2. The northern tribes formed their own nation called Israel or Ephraim. The southern tribes remained loyal to the house of David and became known as Judah. For over 200 years, they existed as 2 separate nations. Then the Assyrians conquered the north and scattered those tribes permanently. Judah survived longer, but was eventually destroyed by Babylon. 2 sticks, 2 kingdoms. Divided for nearly 3,000 years, but Ezekiel saw them becoming one again. In 1950, Israel passed the law of return. Any Jew from anywhere in the world could immigrate to Israel. The scattered began returning, and they came from everywhere. In 1991, the Israeli government launched Operation Solomon. Ethiopian Jews, known as Beta Israel, had been isolated in Africa for centuries. Many believed these ancient Israelites had been lost forever. Within just 36 hours, Israeli planes airlifted 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to their homeland. The seats were removed from the aircraft to fit more people. Families who had prayed for generations to return to Zion finally touched the soil of Israel. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, over 1 million Russian Jews immigrated to Israel. This was the largest single wave of Jewish immigration in the nation's modern history. They came from Moscow, from Siberia, from Kazakhstan, from every corner of the former USSR. Jews who had been forbidden to practice their faith, forbidden to speak Hebrew, forbidden even to identify as Jewish, were suddenly free to return home. DNA studies have now confirmed what the scriptures declared. Jews from Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas share ancient Israelite ancestry, despite being scattered for millennia. Ashkenazi Jews from Poland, and Sephardic Jews from Morocco, and Beta Israel from Ethiopia all carry genetic markers linking them to the same ancestral population that lived in ancient Israel. For the first time in 3,000 years, Jews from every corner of the earth are returning to one land, speaking one language, under one flag. Picture this scene at Ben Gurion Airport. A Beta Israel family from Ethiopia speaking Amharic. Next to them, a Russian family speaking Russian. Behind them, Yemeni Jews speaking Arabic. All boarding flights to the same city. All reading the same Torah. All carrying Israeli passports. This is not a historical curiosity. This is happening now. The sticks Ezekiel held in his hands 2,500 years ago are one stick today. Israel exists. Israel is unifying. 2 prophecies fulfilled. But Ezekiel was not done. God showed him something that would happen after Israel returned, after the scattered reunited, after the nation stood on its feet again. God showed Ezekiel a war. He saw a coalition, nations that hated each other in his day, nations with nothing in common. Yet Ezekiel saw them unified. He saw them armed. He saw them marching toward Israel from one direction, the far north, and he named them, one by one. Prophecy 3. Gog and Magog Coalition. Ezekiel received a prophecy about a future invasion of Israel. God told him to set his face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. God said he would put hooks in his jaws and bring him out with his whole army. The invasion would come from the far north. It would be like a cloud covering the land. It would happen in the latter years against a people gathered from many nations who had been brought back from the sword and now live in safety. God named the coalition that would attack Israel. Gog from Magog, Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer, Beth Togarmah. At the time Ezekiel wrote this, most of these names referred to people groups and regions that had nothing to do with each other. Some were enemies of each other. Yet Ezekiel saw them unified in a military alliance against Israel in the last days. Ancient historians and geographers can trace these names to their modern equivalents. Magog refers to the region north of the Black Sea, the territory of the ancient Scythians. This is modern Russia. Rosh also points to a northern people and many scholars connect it to Russia. Meshech and Tubal were regions in Anatolia and the Caucasus, corresponding to parts of modern Turkey and Russia. Persia requires no interpretation. Persia is Iran. The nation kept this name until 1935, when it was officially changed to Iran. Ezekiel did not use a code word. He used their actual name. Cush refers to the region south of Egypt, corresponding to Sudan and Ethiopia. Put was the region west of Egypt, modern Libya. Gomer and Beth Togarmah were Anatolian regions connected to modern Turkey and Armenia. Now look at a map. Ezekiel says this invasion comes from the far north. Geography does not lie. Draw a line directly north from Jerusalem on any map. It passes through one nation, Russia. This is not interpretation. This is latitude. Moscow sits at the exact northern axis Ezekiel described 2,500 years ago. Ezekiel says God will put hooks in the jaws of Gog and drag him into this conflict. The imagery suggests the invaders do not necessarily want to come. Something hooks them. Something pulls them into this war against their natural interests. Think about that image. A fish does not swim toward the hook willingly. It is caught. It is pulled against its own survival instinct. Ezekiel is saying Russia will not invade Israel because it wants to. Something will drag it in. Economic collapse, military entanglement, regional chaos. A chain of events so overwhelming that retreat becomes impossible. The hook is already in the water, and the tension on the line is building. Now look at the current situation. Russia has established military bases in Syria, directly on Israel's northern border. Russia's alliance with Iran deepens every year. International sanctions have pushed Russia toward Middle Eastern partnerships it might otherwise have avoided. The Ukraine war has created economic hooks that bind Russia to alternative alliances it would have rejected a decade ago. Iran openly calls for the destruction of Israel. This is not interpretation of their policy, it is their stated policy. Iran funds Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran funds Hamas in Gaza. Iran funds the Houthis in Yemen. All three are positioned on Israel's borders. Iran's nuclear program advances despite international pressure. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is deployed in Syria. Turkey, under President Erdogan, has become increasingly hostile to Israel. Erdogan speaks of restoring Ottoman influence in the Middle East. Turkey remains a NATO member, but increasingly aligns with Russia and Iran on regional issues. Libya remains unstable and hostile to Israel. Sudan has normalized relations, but remains a fragile state vulnerable to radical influence. For the first time in history, every nation Ezekiel named is allied or aligning. Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, Libya, all hostile to Israel, all armed, all positioning. This is not prophecy that might happen someday. This is prophecy happening in your news feed. But Ezekiel does not just describe the invasion. He describes the outcome. And it is unlike any war in human history. God says his fury will rise. The earth begins to shake. Mountains collapse. Fire falls from the sky. The invading armies, moments before unified against Israel, turn on each other in chaos. Brother kills brother. Disease sweeps through the ranks. Weapons fall from panicked hands. When the dust settles, 5 out of every 6 soldiers lie dead. Not from Israeli bullets, not from Israeli strategy, from the hand of God. The intervention is so visible, so undeniable, that the whole world sees it, and the nations know. This was not military might. This was not luck. This was God defending his people. After this war, something changes. Israel's eyes open. The nations witness God's power. And Ezekiel sees one more thing: a temple that does not exist yet, but the conditions for it are already in place. Prophecy 4. Rebuilding the third temple. Ezekiel received the longest and most detailed vision of his prophetic career. For 9 full chapters, God showed him a temple, not the temple that had been destroyed, a future temple. Ezekiel recorded precise measurements: every gate, every court, every chamber, the dimensions of the altar, the duties of the priests, the regulations for offerings, and then the most dramatic moment. The glory of the Lord returned and filled the temple. A river flowed from the temple toward the east, healing the land wherever it went. No temple currently stands in Jerusalem. The first temple was destroyed by Babylon in 586 BC. The second temple was destroyed by Rome in 70 AD. In 691 AD, the Dome of the Rock was built on the Temple Mount. For nearly 2,000 years, no temple has been possible. The location has been controlled by others. The conditions have not existed. But something has changed. Today, everything needed to build the third temple exists. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has recreated all 102 sacred vessels required for temple service. Priestly garments have been manufactured according to biblical specifications. Kohanim, men of priestly descent, have been trained in the ancient rituals. Architectural plans are complete. The blueprints are ready. In 2022, 5 red heifers were brought to Israel from Texas. The red heifer is required for the purification ritual described in Numbers 19. Without it, the temple service cannot begin. For centuries, no qualifying red heifer existed. Now they are being raised and inspected by Israeli priests. The Sanhedrin, the traditional Jewish high court, was re-established in 2004 for the first time in 1,600 years. In recent years, for the first time in modern history, Israeli government officials have publicly discussed temple construction as a policy option, not a distant dream. What was considered radical to even mention in 1990 is now debated in the Knesset. The Temple Institute has completed training the first cohort of priests in temple service rituals in over 2,000 years. These men are not preparing for a theoretical future. They are ready now. The line between impossible and inevitable is disappearing. For 2,000 years, skeptics said this prophecy was impossible. No temple, no priests, no conditions. Today, every single element exists. The vessels, the priests, the plans, the red heifers, the religious court. Everything is ready except the political will. Some scholars believe the Gog and Magog war creates the conditions for the Third Temple. When God intervenes so dramatically that the entire world witnesses it, when the invading armies are destroyed supernaturally, The political landscape shifts. Israel's spiritual eyes open. Ezekiel 39 verse 22 says that from that day forward, the people of Israel will know that the Lord is their God. After such a divine rescue, the resistance to the temple crumbles. What was impossible becomes inevitable. Ezekiel saw it all: the war, the victory, the awakening, and the temple that follows. Let me show you what you have just witnessed. Ezekiel prophesied that Israel, scattered and dead as a nation for 2,000 years, would rise again. In 1948, that prophecy was fulfilled. Ezekiel prophesied that the divided Jewish people would return from every nation and become one people again. Jews from over 100 countries have returned to Israel. That is happening now. Ezekiel prophesied that a coalition of nations led by a power from the far north would invade Israel. Russia, Iran, and Turkey are allied today. That is setting up now. Ezekiel prophesied a third temple with exact measurements. Every condition to build it exists. That is ready now, fulfilled, unfolding, setting up, ready. 4 prophecies, 1 prophet, 100% accuracy. But there is something you need to understand about these prophecies. They are not random predictions scattered across history. They are a sequence, a pattern, and the pattern reveals something about the God who designed it. The first prophecy, dry bones, seemed the most impossible. A nation extinct for 2,000 years brought back to life. No precedent in human history. Yet it happened exactly as Ezekiel said, on the exact timeline God intended. Not early, not late. In 1948, when the world was ready to witness it. The second prophecy, 2 sticks, required something even more impossible. Not just bringing Israel back, but reuniting tribes that had been separated for 3,000 years. Gathering people from 100 nations who had forgotten each other, who spoke different languages, who lived in different cultures, and making them one people again. It is happening now, not because humans planned it, because God is keeping His word. The third prophecy, Gog and Magog, names nations that were enemies of each other when Ezekiel wrote it. Russia and Persia had nothing in common. Turkey and Iran were not allies, yet today, for the first time in history, they are aligned exactly as Ezekiel described. Not because diplomats engineered it, because God said it would happen, and God does not lie. The fourth prophecy, the third temple, requires political conditions that did not exist 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Yet today, every single element is in place. The vessels, the priests, the plans, the red heifers, everything. Not because activists made it happen, because the same God who spoke it 2,500 years ago is bringing it to pass. Do you see the pattern? Each prophecy was impossible. Each prophecy happened anyway. And each prophecy reveals the same truth. God does not need human permission to keep His promises. He does not need favorable conditions. He does not need the odds in His favor. He speaks, and it happens. That is who you are dealing with. And here is what that means for how you read the rest of Scripture. If Ezekiel saw 1948 with this precision, then every prophet who saw the future saw it with the same precision. Isaiah saw the virgin birth 700 years before it happened. Micah named the exact town where the Messiah would be born. Daniel predicted the exact year the Messiah would be cut off. Zechariah saw the 30 pieces of silver and the pierced hands. Prophecy is not guesswork. Prophecy is not vague symbolism that can be twisted to mean anything. Prophecy is God declaring the end from the beginning with surgical accuracy. And if the prophets were this accurate about the first coming of the Messiah, and this accurate about the rebirth of Israel, then they are this accurate about what comes next. The same prophets who saw 1948 also saw a 7-year period of tribulation. They saw a world government. They saw a mark without which no one can buy or sell. They saw the Messiah returning to Jerusalem. These are not metaphors. These are events described with the same precision as the dry bones and the coalition from the north. You are living in the generation that will see it. Not your grandchildren, not some distant future. You, the generation that saw Israel reborn, is the generation that will see the rest unfold. That is what makes this moment in history different from every other moment. The clock started ticking in 1948, and everything Ezekiel saw after that is now within reach. Ezekiel saw your generation. He saw the headlines you are reading. He saw the nations forming coalitions on your news feed. He wrote it down 2,500 years ago for people who would be alive when it happened. That is you. You are not watching ancient history. You are watching prophecy unfold in real time. And if God's word is this precise about nations and wars and temples, then God's word is this precise about you. The God who brought dry bones back to life after 2,000 years does not abandon what he starts. The God who gathered scattered people from 100 nations does not forget his promises. The God who defends Israel from impossible odds does not lose battles. This is not just about nations and temples. This is about a God whose word does not fail. Ever. If he kept his promise to restore Israel when every empire said it was impossible, he will keep every promise he has made to you. If he can resurrect a nation from extinction, he can resurrect anything in your life that looks dead. If he can reunite tribes separated for 3,000 years, he can restore what you think is broken beyond repair. If he can align enemy nations according to a plan written 2,500 years ago, he can work out circumstances in your life that seem completely out of control. That is what Ezekiel's prophecies prove, not just that the future is set, that the God who sees the future keeps his word, every single time, without exception, no matter how impossible it looks. Ezekiel stood in a valley of dry bones and asked one question: "Can these bones live?" God answered. The bones rose. A nation returned from extinction. Impossible. Then it happened in 1948. He saw enemy nations align from the far north. Russia, Iran, Turkey. Impossible alliances. Now they are allied. He saw a temple that could never be rebuilt. Impossible conditions. Every vessel is ready. Every priest is trained. Every blueprint is drawn. 1 prophet. 4 prophecies. 1 already proven. 3 converging now. History answered the question of whether Ezekiel was right. The answer is yes. The bones are standing. The nations are moving. The temple is waiting. And every single prophecy proves the same thing. When God makes a promise, nothing can stop it. Not time, not empires, not impossible odds. That is the God you are dealing with. That is the God who sees you right now. And if his word is this reliable about nations, it is this reliable about every promise he has made to you. Which prophecy hit you the hardest? The dry bones rising in 1948? The DNA proving scattered tribes are one nation again? Russia and Iran allied exactly where Ezekiel said? Or the red heifers and trained priests ready to build the temple right now? Tell me in the comments. If this opened your eyes to what is actually happening in the Middle East, subscribe. There are more prophecies unfolding that you need to see. Hit the like button so this reaches someone who is confused about what is happening right now. And check the other videos on this channel. Every single one will bless you with understanding you will not find anywhere else.